macronutrients today. What are they? Why do I need them? And we'll also talk about when we want them, particularly in something like this in the gym and in general throughout your day and your lives. So Lonnie can't cheat. I already showed Nancy. So do y'all know what macronutrients are? Because I was kind of surprised when people are like,
no.
What is a macronutrient? Because we kind of all know really what macronutrients are. So Lonnie could have cheated, maybe, right? And I already showed Nancy. But really, it's your carbohydrates, your fats, and your proteins, right? I put in water here. Water is obviously vital. 0 calories. I also put alcohol in here because I wanted to point out, you get so much when people drink and they're like, oh, they didn't have sugar in it, so I'm fine, right? And sugar is a carbohydrate, and if you have more sugar with your alcohol, obviously that's going to be more of an overall impact. But you should see this, that your alcohol, unfortunately, has about almost twice as many calories as your sugars or your carbohydrates. So there's the worst news of this presentation, right? So what we're going to deal with today, carbohydrates, fats, proteins, they all have an energy rating. Your carbohydrates rate roughly 4 calories per gram, fats 9, proteins 4 calories per gram. That's not exactly totally true because you actually take more energy for your body to digest protein. So you'll net a little bit less over total calories. So a lot of people are going to be thinking about things, managing their calories, want to stay satiated. So protein, and we'll also talk about fiber, are going to be 2 things to really get in your diet to help keep you full without having a lot of calories. So we kind of minimize the calories in the day, but still feel good, have good energy, and all that stuff. All right, so let's keep it moving. We're going to kind of break these down individually and talk about them. We're going to talk about carbohydrates first. I guess shouldn't be, but sort of controversial. I'm sure you heard people talk about, I cut carbs, lost weight, or this or that. So we're going to talk about why we actually, what they are and why we actually want carbohydrates in our diet, at least in certain situations. So there's really just a string of saccharides, right? So you have simple, complex. If it's 1 or 2 of these glucose molecules strung together, we're talking simple. You get, 3 or more, it's complex. So just larger, the larger ones, they're all broken down to simple. So the larger ones take longer to break down than the shorter ones, than the simple carbohydrates. So if we think about that, give you an example, if I worked out today, worked out really hard, depleted all of my, blood glucose, muscle glycogen stores, all that. Well, now maybe I want the shorter carbohydrates that break down a little faster to bring it all up. So it's just kind of a perspective to have. A lot of times we do like those longer chain carbohydrates that digest slower because it keeps us full longer. But if we need to bring our blood sugar back up really quick, then you get into these simple carbohydrates. So post-workout, a lot of times we'll want these fast-acting carbohydrates. So that gets into kind of the wins. And we'll address that a little bit more. So why and when do we need carbs? So it's just energy currency for your body. Really all of what we talked about they have energy, carbs, proteins, fats, all can be used for energy. Mainly carbs and fats, with proteins playing a smaller role, are your energy sources. And in certain situations, you want carbohydrates versus fats. I got a neuroscience background, so one of the big things here is your brain. Your brain wants carbs for energy. You can't run without carbohydrates and get alternative routes. So you're going to ketosis and using ketones, things like that. Sure, a good way to think about it is you're just not giving this machine the ideal energy source it wants. So we can get it running, we can get it moving, but it's not the best energy source we want. And I hear this all the time. A lot of people actually are okay with carbs, even though they'll tell me they cut out carbs. But cut out carbs, lost a lot of weight. Okay, what'd you cut out? I was like, well, I cut out alcohol, which, again, not actually a carb. And I cut out like candy and sweets. And I'm like, what are you eating? He's like, oatmeal, have sweet potatoes tonight, fruits, veggies. I'm like, there's all a bunch of carbs, buddy. So really, when you have your healthy carbs, they're usually things we view as good, nutrient-dense foods. Again, we talk about being satiated, having a little more time between meals. That's good if we want to kind of regulate our total calories. These healthy carbs are going to provide bulk without a lot of calories, and also a lot of micronutrients as well. And usually it's just the ones you don't need a trainer to tell you're bad. Your sweets, candies, different kind of breakfast pastries, all those things are the ones we want to avoid. The other, and we'll address this in a little more detail in a second, but fiber is a carbohydrate. So we never really want to totally cut carbs because we always want some amount of fiber. It works a little bit differently than most of our carbs, so we'll talk about that in a second. But you really want the carbohydrates around intense activity and also throughout the day for brain function. We're going to show you a real, kind of fancy slide in a little bit talking about this, but you'll have, when you're working out, you could be working out what's either called anaerobically or aerobically. So to simplify, that means either with or without oxygen. If I'm breathing really heavy, I'm getting winded, things like that, that's anaerobic. So we can't use fats for anaerobic activity. So a lot of your gym activities, fats are just not a good ideal energy source, and carbohydrates are better. Now you get to, like, say you get on the elliptical, you just go 30 minutes, something like that, steady state. That can be an aerobic activity, or certainly if you get to lighter, daily chores that are light, or you're being sedentary, fat's a little bit more of an ideal energy source for that. So again, it's not that it can't work this way, it's just the most ideal way to work, and that's what we're talking about. This is trying to get a little more efficient with everything. So again, let's talk about fiber, because again, that's another reason we want carbs. So we talk about carbohydrates, brain function around intense activity, and also we want our fiber. So it's a carbohydrate found in most of things that we think of as carbohydrates: fruits, veggies, nuts, legumes, whole grains. Somewhere in the 20 to 30 recommendation. It's going to literally provide more bulk to your food without giving you a whole lot more calories, keep you full longer, again, more times between meals, more satiated. That's really important when you're trying to regulate total calories. Slows that digestion, stabilizes blood glucose levels, cholesterol can lower, keeps regular, everyone knows that one. Reduce risk of colon cancer and also diabetes too. So it's got a whole host of health benefits, and that's why we want there, whether you're trying to just be healthy, good GI tract function, or actually trying to lose weight. Fiber can really be beneficial. Okay, so we talked about carbohydrates, and we won't talk about the other main energy source we use, fat. So again, we think of these are two main energy currencies. So it's going to be a little oversimplified, but to just kind of simply break down your fats, you have saturated and unsaturated, basically dealing with animal versus plant sources, solids at room temperature versus liquids, and negative effects on cholesterol versus positives. With our unsaturated, there is trans fats. We generally want to basically avoid those. Saturated can be okay in moderation, but we generally think of as the other unsaturated are healthy fats. And particularly we have these essential fatty acids. You've probably heard of this, your omega fatty acids. There's 3s, 6s, and 9s. The 3s and 6s are actually your essential ones. Whenever you see that, well, we didn't see that with carbohydrates, we will see it with proteins and essential amino acids. That means your body can't make it, so you have to get it from your diet. So that'll lead into obviously why we want some fats. So again, why do I need fats? So it's an energy source for whether we think of as light aerobic activity or kind of daily activities, or again, if we're being sedentary, something like that. It's good for some of this low intensity activity. We need our essential fatty acids. We'll talk about the alphabet soup in a little bit, but these are not made by our body, and they're essential not just because they're not made by our body, but we need them. We need them for functioning of many different tissues, very critical in the inflammatory response. And we do generally eat a good deal of a little bit of both of these, but as a generalization, we often overconsume our 6s versus our 3s. So we want both of them, and the ratio is also important. We want to try to bring our ratio a little closer to 1-to-1 versus we're usually way imbalanced, the 6s versus the 3s. So what are these so we can find them? Obviously, there's all kinds of supplements. So here's your alphabet soup, so you know what we're dealing with. But your LAs make GLAs and AAs, so that's your essential omega-6. Your ALA is your essential omega-3, makes your EPA, DHA. And here's some example of food, so your leafy veggies, nuts, seeds, grains, vegetable oils. And again, most people need to load up a little more on this, so we maybe get more on average than everybody else, right? So flaxseed fish, think like your tunas, salmons, mackerel, sardines, things like that. Oysters, walnuts, spinach. So that gives you some examples there to load up on these guys. Okay. All right, now we gave you like a really fancy fun graph we're going to go over. All right, that's great, huh? So
if you're eating a bunch from that column that says 6, you need to eat more from the column that says 3.
Correct. And most people on average get, and because all these things, if you look at your fishes, they'll have different levels and percentages of the omega-3s in them. So, but as a generalization, most people need to really, just kind of continue eating some of these healthy things here, but really try to focus on adding whether it's some flaxes, some fish, oysters, walnuts, spinach. So yes, loading up a little more on these to balance it out. Or even supplementation, with this. And I mean, I sort of supplement. I use some flaxseed, in my shakes, stuff like that. So yeah. All right. So here is the energy source we're using over the activity we're doing, the duration. Okay? So we have minutes and then scales to hours. So most of our exercises and movements and activities in the gym are going to be short duration. I'm going to knock this out real quick. The creatine train, we didn't talk about this. It's not a macronutrient. It's more for athletics. If you're doing like an explosive vertical jump, 40-yard dash, 1 rep max, you actually use this energy source. So when you need energy, basically really quick energy, ATP is what all these things are going to eventually make. That's what this uses. For most of your people in your gym, you're going to be doing either this or somewhere in here, right? So look at these. We have anaerobic glycolysis, and see these keywords right here. When we see glycogen, let's think carbohydrates, right? So glycogen on anaerobic, that's carbohydrates without oxygen. Aerobic, with oxygen, carbohydrates, right? And then we get to our free fatty acids and our triglycerides, that's our fats. Notice they're for aerobic with oxygen, but there's no anaerobic process of fatty acids or triglycerides because your body can't. It needs oxygen, it needs to oxidate these fatty acids. So that's why if you're doing activities, we've got some people in boxing, so we're doing boxing, we're gonna get winded in boxing, we're gonna have to kind of slow down. These activities that we get winded in, we want good storage of muscle glycogen leading up to it. So think, in the 24 hours or so prior to the activity, and then we want to replenish our muscle glycogen levels after the activity, okay? A lot of your lifting is like that, or general resistance training, HIIT classes, things like that.
How do you replenish your glycogen?
So carbohydrates, fast-acting carbohydrates. So that's when we get into some of those more simple carbs. Fruit's a great healthy source there. Actually, Tim, another trainer, he posted, and he's a little tongue-in-cheek, but he was doing his meal prepping. He had a bunch of gummy bears. So he's like, oh yeah, I gotta replenish my muscle glycogen. I'm sure he has my wife has a gummy bear addiction too.
Quick question too. You kind of had it before. You're getting timing-wise, like protein. It keeps it's changing. It's 45 minutes with an hour afterwards.
Like post-workout?
Yeah.
Right, yeah, and we'll talk about it a little bit afterwards. Usually, I think the studies I've seen have been within an hour or so. So yeah, and then that's for kind of building, repairing, and recovering with the tissues.
How important is it? Because I know people, they eat a lot of protein.
Yeah.
And so people eat their stuff 45 minutes afterwards, and then 2 hours afterwards, they're eating even more protein.
Right.
Is that second loading really doing anything, or is it just like making them feel better because they're getting protein?
It depends on how much you need in a day. We'll talk about the exact levels. So, if you have a high, you probably need to be a pretty big person, or something like that, or going for a really kind of muscle building program or something like that.
Right.
But I'll actually give you a formula so everyone can figure out exactly how much protein they need in a day. Is that exciting? Yes.
Some people take creatine powder.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what
Is
And
that good to do?
it's great for basically replenishing your explosive movements. So say, this is great, so say I'm a football player. I'm never really working that much longer than just a few seconds. Right? But I gotta be able to recover, and I actually have a long break to recover, and be super explosive again. Get the third, fourth quarter, might not have that same pop. That's where something like creatine can come in. It's usually better, something like boxing it can work for, but it's usually better for a lot of your more athletes and things like that. A lot of your natural gym goers, it can help a little bit. But as you start going into kind of, say if you're doing a lift, I'm doing 1, 2, 3 reps, I'm more using this creatine drive train. Once I start doing a little higher reps, 5, 6, 7, 8, or even up, I'm gonna start shifting here a little bit more into glucose and muscle glycogen and things like that. So yeah. But yeah, it certainly can help with your explosive movements. And okay, so the point I was trying to hammer home with here is just this idea that if we're doing, and it's different for different people, but some activity where we're going to get winded, we're gonna have this anaerobic activity, carbohydrates is the ideal source of energy, but other times you can actually have a mix of the two. So it's not bad to have a little bit either. So we think healthy carbohydrates, and a lot of times actually fats end up being a little bit more of an efficient energy source. You see when we think I'm in the garden all day, or maybe it's even more of a sedentary day, I'm at the office, these really low intensity, long duration activities, your fatty acids and triglycerides end up being a good energy source for that. So maybe one day, I'm gonna be stuck in the office all day, can't get my workout in, the day before it's more about having healthy fats, things like that, a little bit of carbohydrates for brain function. The next day, we got intense activities scheduled. Well, 24 hours prior, I need to go ahead and get my muscle glycogen up. So I'm gonna have some carbohydrates there. And also after the activity, a little bit of short, fast-acting carbohydrates to replenish glycogen stores. Okay, we got that down? There's gonna be a quiz afterwards, so everyone's ready for it? Okay, and then now, but that's our main energy sources. We're gonna now address protein, which is, similar kind of carbohydrates, but this is a chain of amino acids, right? So you have several amino acids. Some of the fats are essential. So again, that means they're not made by the body. We gotta get them through our diet. If you have animal proteins in your diet, you actually get a full amino acid spectrum. You can still get it from vegetable sources, but you need to have a little bit more diverse of a diet. So if you kind of eat the same things all the time, you might be lacking some key amino acids. And like I stated there, it can be used for energy, but the main function is to build and repair tissue, okay? So again, we do resistance training, and certainly that could be with your barbell, dumbbell stuff, weights like that. But it really can be pretty broad. Boxing can be a form of resistance training. You're doing the ropes or the med ball stuff, or jumps, or athletic movements. We're breaking down our muscles. Our body actually compensates to this stimulus to make us 101 or 102 or 103% of what we were before, so we get better. And in order to get better, we need the activity, and then we also need the substrates. And think about the protein as that substrate. We need that in there, that part of the equation, to actually build the muscle, build a little stronger, build a little bit better. And how much do we need? So this will talk about what Dan was getting to. The recommended amount is 0.8 per kilogram, not pound, of body weight. And this is where you see a lot of people really over-consuming protein because they bought it from someone that sells protein. But I mean, there is something to it, because when we're working out and we're being athletic, things like that, we do want a little more. Most people going in the gym, working out, like a 1 to 1.5 gram per kilogram body weight. Again, kilogram, take your weight. It's a much smaller number, you're dividing by 2.2. Okay, 1 to 1.5, if you're really trying to pack on a lot of muscle, maybe going as high as 2 grams, again, per kilogram of body weight. And we talk about when, so we talk about we do want to following exercise. It is important to have studies show that within about an hour or so of exercise, it's going to help you promote recovery, growth, things like that. That's important. Actually, an hour or two, somewhere in that time frame, it will vary person to person. You can have it before your workout, pre-exercise, to increase your glucagon. That will actually release muscle glycogen from your own stores to help your blood glucose levels. So it can actually help out even pre-workout, and also it promotes satiation. So remember, like that second slide, we talked about protein actually has the least net calories of any of them, and it also keeps you full. So if we fill up, particularly people wanting to kind of regulate the calories, things like that, we have a high diet with protein, fiber, we can promote that satiation without really having a big calorie impact.
Could I ruin everything if you don't mind?
Sure.
Pre-workouts. I don't know if you guys hear about this, but you see people drinking these things. They're called pre-workouts. What the heck are they? I had one or two, and it just seemed like someone was giving me a lot of caffeine.
There's a lot of caffeine. It's a lot. I use coffee as a pre-workout. It's a lot of caffeine. Some of them have things like alpha-ketoglutarate, which is a nitric oxide enhancer, and it's supposed to cause vasodilation, so you have more blood flow to the muscles. Things like that. I know the caffeine gets you jacked. I'm not sure if that stuff works, but
the rest of it, it's not really giving you any nutrients, is it?
Some of them will load it in there. It just depends on exactly which ones, but usually it's their proprietary blend. Certainly can have some amino acids in there, things like that. Some will put creatine in there as well, some stuff like that. So it just really depends on each one they do. I stopped taking them because I did a decaffeinated one and I didn't really find it did a lot.
So you just eat well, essentially is what it comes down to.
Yeah, and
do this stuff and you're fine.
Really, we're talking about energy in a couple ways. You can talk about making ATP in my body with carbohydrates for energy, and that's what we're talking about. But then there's also stimulus. So now we're talking about a little bit different of an energy source, an actual pharmacological stimulation that's a lot of times work a little bit more through the nervous system actually. Whereas we're looking at here with eating the carbohydrates, a little bit more working through just kind of your natural food and GI and all that stuff. So, yeah. It's exciting, guys? Sure, we learn a lot? Okay, is everyone ready for the quiz? But any other questions, things like that? And again, this is a little bit more designed around eating certain foods that is going to make you more efficient at your workouts and things like that. If we follow kind of a script like this, and again, a lot of people in the gym have goals of whether it's weight loss or different dress size or whatever it is, and kind of wanting to either lose weight, maintain weight, look a little bit better, things like that. Just think this with the right amount. So you get on your MyFitnessPals, things like that, and log it in. It'll give you not only the quantity amount, but we can also look at the quality of foods. We talk about the different ones, what are the healthy ones, and kind of when we want it. So kind of just put them together there. But it's just about that and planning ahead. That's the biggest thing there. If we plan ahead, and that's why I want to kind of present this is have a perspective. Okay, I got this going on like tomorrow, and I'm thinking about my food and how I'm going to fuel my body. And that's why we usually get into trouble, is because instead of doing that, and this just happens with life and everything like that, we're just like, I'm hungry, what's available? Atomic burger. There it is. So
he's talking about me. I know. So the day before my workout, if we're doing weights the next day, 24 hours before.
Roughly, it'll vary person, but something like that.
So for weights, I should focus on.
You have some carbohydrates. Get a little bit of carbohydrates in. So probably that much before. Again, we want some simple carbohydrates like fruits throughout the day and things like that. But yeah, think about some more complex carbohydrates, whether it's like having some oatmeal, like 24 hours of breakfast before, or something like that. Some whole grain oatmeal. And having your sweet potato the night before, things like that. Whole grain breads, things like that. So you can have that. But again, quantity is still important. Yeah. So we got to make sure it all fits into our total calorie budget and all that.
After the weight type of workout,
yeah.
Some protein is good.
Some protein's good, and maybe a little bit that's why I have a protein shake. So I have like some protein in there with some fruit, something like that. So that gives me a fast-acting carbs.
And then 24 hours before I do road runners on Tuesday evening, which everybody ought to go to, by the way.
Right, and that's more like a steady state run, huh? Who's doing that? Yeah, so more steady state. So you can probably operate a little bit more on fats or carbohydrates with that.
Aerobic stuff is carbohydrates too.
Really, it can work either. The shorter and more intense the aerobic activity, the more carbs, and then the longer, lower intensity activity, the more fat. But your body's probably going to take a little mix of the two in those activities.
So protein is more for recovery.
Yeah, a little bit of energy source, and you get things like branched chain amino acids can help for, I forget what it was, like 10-15% of your energy during resistance training, but it's more for repair and recovery with a side role in energy usage.
The protein drinks you talk about, I mean, I think they're like muscle milk, they call it.
Right, there's all kinds of different brands,
chocolate,
stuff like that.
vanilla, strawberry. Are they, and they say like, you know, like good for protein. Are they good? Are they high in sugars? I mean, they say
It really
100 calories,
depends.
but
Yeah, it really depends. There's some that are just protein. So like you're getting like 20 grams of protein, nothing else. They don't taste that great. So I'll have one, I'll a little bit more try and get my calories up. I have one called like Cytogainer. It's got like 100 grams of carbs in it. I'm like, oh, it tastes delicious, right? And then there's a reason for that because it puts more carbs and fats in it. So it really varies. And I even talked to a guy that worked for Abbott and he was talking about how they would have more cholesterol, more saturated fat than they want in the supplements. He's like, we sell more. You know, so like, so you just got to check each one individually, but there certainly are ones, if you're wanting a more kind of leaner look or things like that, maybe just making your own with like a pure protein and like some fruit, something like that.
you have to check for sugar. What would you look for? When you look for ingredients, you look for like grams of protein, you look for sugar.
Yeah, I mean certainly want grams of protein, and again, sugar is not necessarily bad because you want a little bit of sugar post-workout and things like that.
Right.
I would look a lot on those. I like a little bit of fiber in it. Just because you want a little fiber with most meals. Watch your cholesterol. A lot of them put a lot of cholesterol in there because again, it kind of tastes good.
Yeah.
So watch that. And yeah, a little sugar is good, but make sure, if you can get like a ratio where fiber and sugar are similar, that's always great. So certainly want more protein than sugar, but like sometimes you get something where it's like 5 of each or something like that. That's pretty good, because you're getting that fiber. The fiber will slow down the release of the blood glucose, so that kind of helps compensate if there's a little sugar in there.
Is there a type of protein? Because I know a lot of these bars and shakes have different types of protein. A lot use whey protein.
Yeah.
Not getting me on camera.
Yeah.
I see that. Do you like whey protein? Are there different types you like? Because I know some are more effective than others.
Right, yeah.
And you see articles that like, it's almost like eggs. They say it's good for you one day, and the next day someone else goes, it's...
Usually you want a diverse array of them. You're talking about, your wheys, your eggs, soy. That happens a lot of times. People talk about soy is the worst thing in the world, or like it's the best protein in the world.
I mean, in those bars, in those shakes, is there one type of protein you prefer into those?
Yeah, I mean, they'll have isolates and concentrates. The isolates are usually a little bit better than the concentrates.
Okay.
But other than that, I try to get, try not to have too much of your total protein actually coming from your supplements and things like that, so a fraction of it. But, you're also getting, getting some egg protein from just eggs, getting some dairy protein, I'm getting some protein from chicken, fish. You look at, we want some protein. We also wanted to up our, essential fatty acids. Fish is actually something that overlaps both of those. And usually most of them will have a blend of several different types too, versus even just one in there. They'll have some whey isolate, some whey concentrate, maybe some of their soy protein in there, something like that. So yeah. Honestly, the shake I picked, it had the right kind of macronutrient breakdown, it's easy for it to taste good, and that's one reason I like it too, because you're not going to have it if it tastes good. But it had a little bit of fiber in it, and then also was loaded up with some branched chain amino acids, glutamine, so some of these other amino acids that I like in there. And some reputable brands, so kind of like it with that. But yeah. You got a question? You smile, you got a question. You don't buy it.
Have you read anything or any personal preference of certain percentages? I know it all.
Oh, like the ratios and
yeah,
things
it
like that?
depends if you want to go in ketosis or not.
Right. Well, I guess let's say it really depends on your. Someone broke it down like this, and this made a lot of sense. So you get, you do your protein by weight, and you got your calorie budget. So then you got the remaining calories are going to be fats and carbs, and you basically start with something that's more or less just your fats, and then you start working your carbs in based on, okay, I got this workout, I got this workout. So someone might just have like 3 intense workouts in a week. So then it varies. So probably, it just the more frequency you have intense workouts, the more carbohydrates you're going to put in there. And then, you can keep them a little bit lower, and a lot of times that'll put a little more fat burning if you're having a lot more of these lower intensity activities and things like that. But usually they want like weight loss, and ultimately I find so much the quantity is such a huge factor there, because we gotta have the consistency with our diet, just like our workout, and we didn't throw this on there, but you want to create that calorie deficit to lose weight, and usually what happens is people do good for a few days, but then they have their blowout weekend, and then they have a bunch, especially drinks in there, extra foods and things like that. So,
He's
so we-
talking about me again.
I noticed you was looking in your direction, kind of pointed at like, there's other people.
But I thought that was a smart way to do it, is just kind of base it on like a protein fat diet, and then start working the carbs in based on the frequency of intense activities, and kind of surround them on those days. And it makes sense. You might have a little bit bigger calorie budget on your days, prior to and of those days you're working out kind of intense.
Do you recommend like a workout every day or every other day?
I work out like 6 times a week, something like that.
Yeah,
I
you're
always
here.
like one. I always recommend 1 or maybe 2 days off. But usually, even for like grandma or whatever, I want still work out about 5 times a week. Now, those might not necessarily be intense activities. Like it might just be 30-minute brisk walk or something like that. So it really depends on the individual. Probably most individuals would have at least like a couple relatively intense workout, like resistance training type.
Yeah.
But kind of on the lower end, I might have someone doing like 3 light cardio workouts with like 2 resistance training or something like that, and they kind of build up from there. So, but it depends on your schedule, even factors in. Maybe someone wants to work out more, just can't find the time or whatever. So it's a lot of variables in there. So, but I like to do about a couple hours each day. So and you just make sure you don't work the same things. So you let them, if I hit legs today, I'm hit some shoulders tomorrow, hit some back on Saturday, just kind of let everything recover. And then the food. Let's see Dan pointed that out. Get your macronutrients right. Should recover a little bit better, a little quicker, and be ready for that next workout. All right. Exciting, guys. Everyone's going to go work out and then eat some fast-acting carbs and prepare for their day tomorrow. But and that's the idea. Whether it's just for this or whether it's for weight loss or whatever, just get more conscious of fueling our body and get better nutrition results. And then that's no matter what you're trying to do, that's always a big part of this.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Danny.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
Yeah.